Click go live. Okay, we're live.
Hello and welcome to the finale for the 30th Fluent in 3 Months Challenge. My name is Shannon Kennedy and I am the head coach for the Fluent in 3 Months Challenge, now actually known as the Fluent in 3 Months Boot Camp. And along with me today, I have Benny Lewis. Benny, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I originally started these 3-month challenges a very long time ago. I actually took a very long break from them, and I'm back at it again. I'm currently on my own 3-month challenge. And correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, but I believe this is the very last Fluent in 3 Months challenge finale. Doesn't mean that we're hanging our hats up, of course, but this is the last Fi3M challenge finale. Yep.
Yep, that's correct. So this is our final finale for the Fluent in 3 Months Challenge. And we're transitioning over completely to bootcamp, which if you're interested in learning more, you can find out more at fluentin3months.com/bootcamp. So for the 30th Fluent in 3 Months Challenge, 30th Fluent in 3 Months Challenge. Sorry, lots of numbers there. We have 3 finalists and 1 finalist for advanced. So our challenge finalists are Elizabeth, Emma Rose, and Kirsten. And our advanced finalist is Leah. So today with us, we have Emma Rose. So she's going to get the floor and get to ask all the questions. But prior to doing that, I want to just thank Benny for being here, for taking the time to answer questions and help me host this finale. So before I hand the floor over to you for questions, Emma Rose, one of our other finalists, Elizabeth, submitted a question in advance because she wasn't able to join us on the call. So Benny, Elizabeth asks, if I want to get serious about moving from A2 to B1 and beyond, what is the best method to do so?
1 second, my camera's popping in and out. I'll get my backup camera going. Sorry about that.
Sorry, we're just having technical issues.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be kind of my camera will be off for a second, and I'll work on it after I answer this question. So to get from A2 to B1, the thing is to get to the A2 is based mainly on lots of conversations, and to get then onward to the intermediate stage, I find I have to completely change my learning approach. And I think like to get to fluency and beyond, we have to have a dynamic language learning strategy, because I'm all about speak from day one, but only as a beginner. I feel like constant practice is extremely useful. It's going to get us very, very far, but it's not going to get us to beyond the intermediate stages. So generally, I feel I'm at the point where I'm having enough basic conversations about how my weekend was and what I want to do next week, then I need to up the ante a little bit. So I generally try to find teachers who challenge me, teachers who are constantly correcting me, and I don't want corrections. Like right now, I'm still in the beginning stages with Korean, and I tested a teacher out the other day, and she corrected absolutely every mistake I made. It was too much for me. It was overwhelming. I don't need that right now as a beginner. But I made a note of this teacher because she's exactly the kind of person I need when I reach the B1 stage, and I really want to know every single mistake that I'm making. So that's the thing, is you switch to somebody else who puts you under more pressure. And I feel like if each session I'm getting this feeling like I'm really advancing, and it's a very difficult conversation, the teacher is not going easy on me and just asking how I'm doing, but really starting to ask me tricky questions about my thoughts and philosophies on topics. That's going to push me out of that comfort zone. And then everything else that I'm doing, maybe it's about time that I start consuming native content. So if with my Korean, I'm hoping I'll be at that B1 stage in a couple of months. And when I'm there, that's when I'm going to start really embracing watching K-dramas and trying to sing along to Korean songs and to have more complicated conversations with my teachers. But effectively, I need to be pushed out of my comfort zone. And I feel like you could be stuck in A2 forever if you embrace your comfort zone and if you decide, I'm able to have these beginning conversations, I'm able to talk about my weekend and such. So that's great. Why don't I just do that for a while? And that's when you get complacent. So really pushing yourself out of that comfort zone is what I'd recommend.
To give Benny a chance to get his camera working, I'll add to this too. So for me, when I am in the intermediate zone, one of the things that I find really helpful is to really hone in on the things that I had been ignoring at the beginner stage. So in that beginner to early intermediate stage, there's a lot that you can do to get by in a language and lots of mistakes that you can ignore because you're able to do good enough. And for me, intermediate is really when I no longer accept good enough as good enough. So as I'm studying or taking lessons, I'll make notes of the things that my tutor is saying that I need to work on, or I'll ask them to make notes on things that I need to work on. Or if questions come up, or if I find that something's still a little bit challenging for me, I'll make note of that. So then the next study session, what I'll do is kind of go through that checklist that I've created of things that I need to finesse and start to focus in on those things. And it gives me a really good sense of direction with my learning, and all of these little things that tend to get overlooked, they get worked through so that way I can really correct all of these like little things that are holding me back and keeping me from really getting to that next level. At that upper beginner, early intermediate stage, it's really easy to kind of settle and get comfortable and not push past that comfort zone, which is why we often hit what you would call the intermediate plateau. And so doing things that make you uncomfortable is going to be a really good practice for you. So anything that you could do that you think you could do better or that you can't yet do, start paying attention to those things or have someone point them out to you, and then start to work on them one by one until they become things that you're comfortable doing. All right, so we now have Emma Rose and Leah on with us. So Emma Rose, do you want to jump in first with a question for Benny and I?
I have a few questions, but my first question is, so I'm learning Japanese, and even though I know I've made progress, it's hard to tell. So my teacher is a sweetheart. She's half Japanese and half Portuguese. So our lessons, like she speaks to me in Portuguese. And it was good for a while because it's good for my Portuguese, but I wanted her to speak to me in Japanese. So she said, I don't know if that's going to work out. So she did, but I didn't understand her. So she went back to Portuguese, which is my comfort zone and it's her comfort zone. But I really want to be bold and feel comfortable with maybe not knowing what she says, but she doesn't feel that comfortable with it. So like, how do I break that? I mean, what do I do?
So I've run into this issue myself many times, and I've talked of this with a lot of people. In general, for me, this is more of a psychological thing that's happening here. Is that you are used to speaking a particular language with a particular person, so you're used to speaking Portuguese with this person, and it's very hard psychologically to make that switch when the two of you have it burned into your brains. We will use Portuguese mainly to talk to each other. So you might have to essentially find a new person to get way more of that Japanese practice. And you may have to accept maybe the comfort level isn't there with this person. And this applies even if you're learning the language of your partner, or if you have a friend who's a native speaker and you're trying to learn their language. I always recommend people just find somebody else and begin a new relationship that's exclusively in Japanese. And then there is no comfort language to go back on, because you're already establishing right from the beginning, we will only be speaking Japanese together. And even if someone speaks another language, like one of my Korean teachers speaks fluent Spanish, and obviously it would be so much easier for me to speak Spanish to her. But the point is, I never did. I never started speaking Spanish. I started speaking Korean to her. So that's the only language we're ever going to speak. Whereas if I started speaking Spanish to her from the beginning, and then a month later decided maybe I should start changing languages, I don't know if I could do that, because I've already got this like wall in my head, or like I have this mindset that with this person I will only speak Spanish, and it's very hard to break through that. So it doesn't really solve your problem that with this particular person, like you said, there's that kind of discomfort of switching to Japanese when both of you know you can go back to an easier language like Portuguese. I would kind of recommend you try to focus on talking to other people and know that you can talk to that teacher whenever you want to practice your Portuguese. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Okay.
The one thing that oh, sorry.
I'm
Go
just
ahead,
going
Lee.
to add on to what Benny was saying that reminds me of like couples that are bilingual and they have children, and they have, one parent speaks only one language to the child and one parent speaks the other. And I think that works really well. Then if they, both parents are speaking both languages, and so that same kind of idea of this person speaks this language and that's how I communicate with them. I think that's a kind of an example of how it's working for you.
The one thing that I'd add is, thank you for that, Leah, setting up boundaries. So if you're wanting to make that transition because you're comfortable with this person and you want to speak specifically to this person, set up rules around the languages. So literally set a timer and say, these 10 minutes we're going to talk in Japanese, and then we could switch to Portuguese. But creating like a framework almost to work out of. It may seem oddly structural, but doing that is going to help make that transition. And as you get more comfortable talking to one another in Japanese, you can start to increase that time. Another thing you could do is if the timer doesn't work for you, you can also have it be topical. So it's like, next week, let's talk about this in Japanese, and then we'll talk about this in Portuguese. So like that way the subject kind of cues the switch. And then a third thing that you could do is, again, find other ways to kind of pair each language with something. So like it could be time of day. So it's like if we meet in the mornings, that's a Japanese meeting. If we meet in the afternoon, it's a Portuguese meeting. Or, if you are seeing this person, this might not necessarily be for you, Emma Rose, but for someone else, like if you're meeting someone in person, like, if it's like you could have settings for different languages. So you could go to like a Japanese restaurant and like you're going to practice Japanese there. And then you could go to a Brazilian restaurant and then practice Portuguese there. So you can almost create these different ties to each language so that it makes it easier to have a setting or a boundary of some sort around them that you and your teacher or exchange partner kind of establish, so that way it's easier for you to kind of enforce, I guess, or insist on a language in a particular setting or moment or whatever that might be.
Well, thank you for both of you. And I think because she was originally my Portuguese teacher and I picked her because of that, because I knew Japanese would be my next language, it's kind of entrenched. So I think those are good suggestions for me, and just to, really stick to it, because I don't think I'm going to improve as much if I don't.
For sure. All right, Leah, do you have a question you'd like to ask Bunny and I? You're muted.
If I only had a nickel for every time. I don't really have a question so much as that I just wanted to kind of say that really resonated. I was very interested in your response to Elizabeth's question about moving on into getting past the B1, or even from A2 to B1 and on, because I'm living now in Ecuador, and so I'm using Spanish every day, but it's still, I'm to a place where I can get by just fine without, pushing myself. And so the challenge has really been so good to hold my feet to the fire, hold me accountable to moving on and doing the things that are harder and forcing me to do that. But I think that is really, I think it's probably harder to get from A2 to B1 than it is from B2 to C1. It's just because you can get by. And so I don't know. I'm taking your words to heart, to push yourself and keep your nose to the grindstone, even though it's hard, and force yourself to do it, even though you don't have to. And I'm not in college. I'm not getting credit. I'm not getting tested. It's just for myself, and trying
Well,
to stay
even
motivated
if
there.
you're not in college and it's for yourself, you can still create these external drives. So, like for instance, the CEFLR exams, and in the case of Spanish, the Diploma de Español como Lengua Extranjera, the DELE. I've sat that, and I didn't need it. I didn't need it for my work. I didn't need it for going to college. I just
Mhm.
sat it to push myself, to force myself to try to reach this new level. So that's kind of an external driver, because like you said, in your day-to-day life, you don't have anything pushing you to really
Right.
go beyond, because what you have is good enough for what you're currently doing. So it could
Yeah.
be an exam, it could be something like this challenge and just deciding, I want to have this video ready. It could be another trip you're going to do, or you might decide to join Toastmasters and you're going to try and give a speech in Spanish. Just
Mhm.
whatever resonates with you. Try to think of
Mhm.
something in your life that could drive you in those intermediate levels. Have that as a goal in a few months' time and really push yourself for that goal. I personally found sitting those exams in and of themselves, even though I don't need them,
Mhm.
they're not going to enhance my career or anything like that. But
Right.
I've still sat the exams because it's a date in the future, and it forces me to have these lessons with teachers who are going to be having those higher level, because they're familiar with the exam, so they're going to be having
Right.
higher level conversations. They're going to be saying, you keep making this grammar mistake, that won't fly in this exam, we've got to drill that out of you. Whereas
Mhm.
somebody at the A levels, they're not going to care if I'm
Right.
messing up set and a start and that kind of thing. So I think something like that. It doesn't have to be the same thing I'm talking about, but like really think about what intermediate experience would you truly value in your life. Because if I say do an exam and that totally doesn't work for you, that's going to be a complete waste of your time. But if something really resonates with your life, then have that as a goal that you can work
Mhm.
towards, as well as switching up your approach and doing things differently. It helps to have like something to work towards, because even
I
changing your approach, if you don't really need it in any capacity, it's going to be very hard to continue advancing. So that extra pressure really makes a difference.
I think the exam is a really good idea. And Alicia, another gal in this, was learning Spanish with us this round, she talked to her teacher and said, "I want to test for B2. I think is what her goal is B2." And so, this is my second challenge, and I started the challenge. My first challenge probably as an A2 because I'd been working. So I would love to think that I'm at least a B1 now, but I don't really know. So even if I just taking the test and I could say, oh yes, you're a B1, I think, oh good, at least there is some kind of, some kind of criteria that I have met that says yes, you have improved, and there's a quantifiable way to measure that, rather than my tutor saying, oh yeah, you're doing much better now. He's getting paid to say that.
One of the other types of goals that I find kind of gets forgotten about, because we often aim for like these big lofty goals, like have a conversation or read this book or finish this TV series or pass this exam, is more daily micro goals. So a goal could very easily be just that I am going to study 15 minutes every single day, or I am going to learn 200 new words by this date, or I am going to something more directly measurable. Those are really decent accomplishments that add up. And they're not just measurable as in like, okay, I know 200 more words, but also as in like, you can actually map out exactly what your pace is and how long it'll take you to get there, and what you would need to do to accelerate that and maybe push a little bit outside your comfort zone. So they give you a lot of different metrics. I'm very stats driven. So like preparing, I've done the test route and I've taken tests. I did the HSK exam, and I've done my CEFR exams for several languages as well. And at that time, it was a good thing for me to aim towards, but today I do not want the stress of a test. It's not something that motivates me. It actually would probably do the opposite for me. It would create way too much stress. So having something else that I can kind of work towards and actually see my progress, because, you know, when you go from knowing 1,000 words to knowing 2,000 words, that's pretty significant. It's like 100% more knowledge in the language, and that's countable. But especially if you're using a tool like Anki or Memrise or Link, which is counting the number of words that you're able to recognize and are familiar with, and that gives you something very tangible to see just how far you've come. So even though you may in your head be thinking, man, what have I done the last 6 months? And then you can say, oh, that's what I've done the last 6 months. And it's right there in front of you. So that's something else that you can kind of work towards too. And they don't have to be unrelated. So for example, with the HSK exams that I mentioned before for Chinese, there's word lists for these exams. And so measuring how many words I was learning, I was actually able to calculate how many words I needed to learn per day to pass my test by the test date. When it came down to it. And so those two actually worked hand in hand. And the same is true, like, let's say your goal was to read this book that you really love in Spanish. Books have word counts. So, you know, they go together as well. So don't just think about like what your big intermediate goal is going to be, but also think about what like your day-to-day, week-to-week goals are going to be leading up to that, and kind of break it down so that you're not looking at this far out big thing. You have something kind of smaller in the meantime.
Yeah. Manageable goals.
Yes. All right, Amber Rose, you said you had a couple questions. You want to ask another?
Oh yes, I just want to say my name is Irma Rose, and I see it says Andy A because I'm using my son's computer. Okay, so this is my question. There's this language school. They have one in Kyoto and Tokyo. It's called Genki. And they have this 4-week course, and I'm considering taking it in August. But my Japanese teacher says that I should probably wait and go next year because I'll be more advanced and I'll get more out of it. So there's another course too in Italy and for Italian, and I think, well, my Italian is better. I could probably do the one in Italy and have a lot of fun, and I'll probably struggle in the one in Japan, but I kind of want to be struggling. I don't know, because I think it'll improve, because this is something that I'm having a hard time improving, but I don't know. So what do you guys think?
I mean, based on the way you just said it, it sounds like you're definitely leaning towards the Japanese one. The Italian one will be fun, but right now you have this drive, you have this motivation, so use that to do the harder one. And you can always later on, maybe you'll kind of start to run out of that drive and energy next year. And that'll be a great time to go and do the Italian one. So like, it depends, because like some teachers, they want to be prudent. And they know that like if you have more time, you will be more prepared. And I absolutely understand that mentality. But of course, I come from a different mentality, that I like being driven. I like pushing myself. I like being out of my comfort zone. And if I go to an immersion experience, generally I'm the worst one there. So I'm always underprepared and everyone else is coming and doing better than me. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. And I think if you feel like you would be okay with being the person who's struggling more in these classes, but knowing that this is pushing you, I think that it might be a good time for you to go in August. And on top of that, you'll have until August to continue improving. And that's going to give you a really big drive until then. Whereas if you decided, you know what, I'll go next year, then it starts to turn into this similar thing to like a New Year's resolution that like doesn't really have any like, short-term prospects for you. It's more of a someday I'll go to Japan kind of thing. And then you don't really have to work that hard this year because, it's still a year away. I don't have to care about it that much. So my personal preference would be for the August one. I understand where your teacher's coming from because it can be a very stressful experience for a lot of people. And I think people who aren't really part of the mindset that we have in the challenge, it's just completely out of the question for them to go somewhere when they're not that prepared. Whereas I kind of like the idea of going and not being that prepared and being pushed out of my comfort zone. So I would lean a little bit more towards the August version, but that's kind of why your teacher is saying don't do that, because I think traditionally most people feel like you have to feel ready And I don't know this teacher, but maybe they're of that mindset that, you're not going to be 100% ready, so you probably shouldn't do it. And I feel like I'm never going to be 100% ready, so it's now or never kind of thing with me.
Okay.
What do you think, Shannon?
I would agree that it sounds like you're leaning towards doing the Japanese program. So I would definitely prioritize that, because if you have that motivation to do it now, like Benny said, you might not have it later. So I would definitely tap into that. And, that Italian program is very likely not going anywhere. So when you do decide that you're ready to do it, it'll be there for you.
Okay. And do you have any ideas, if you pick between Tokyo or Kyoto, is there one that would be better, or does it matter in the city?
I mean, I would read about both cities and see if there's something that really stands out to you. Like Tokyo has so many things happening, and it's a much more international city. Whereas Kyoto, it's got this. I feel like I might have had a better experience if I spent longer in Kyoto, just because Tokyo has more temptations for me to speak English. But then again, there are people who go to Tokyo and they'll have a completely wonderful immersion experience. So it really depends. But if I were you, rather than making a decision now, maybe read a little bit about it, watch some videos online about people saying top reasons I love Kyoto, top reasons I love Tokyo, and see if something jumps out at you, and you might see, oh, actually, this might mean that's a better city for me personally.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Leah, do you have another question for us?
No, I'm just taking this all in. I lived in Japan for a couple of years, and I have visited both Tokyo and Kyoto. Kyoto's a beautiful city, and it has some really famous gardens there that are just incredible. So I would probably go to Kyoto, because Tokyo is just so huge. But they're both, really interesting places, and I think whatever you do, you'll enjoy it for sure. Have you been to Japan before?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, what?
Have you ever been to Japan?
I've never been.
And so, because I know you studied Japanese this last session, this challenge.
Yeah.
So, what the motivation was just want to learn Japanese, and
well, I wanted to learn a little about the culture, and I wanted to go to Japan, and I wanted to at least be able to have like conversations with the locals, at least simple ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be more enriching for me. So that's kind of what motivated me. But I didn't realize that it would be such a long journey.
It's hard. Japanese is hard, and because you can't read it automatically, you can't sound anything out, and I think it's extra hard. So, good on you to take that on. That's great. I really admire you.
Oh, well, thank you for your tips. That's cool that you were in Japan.
All right, Amara Rose, do you have any other questions?
Let's see. Oh, yes, I have one. Okay. So I'm usually not a shy person. I'm kind of extroverted, and I can like get a language partner like for Portuguese or Italian. But when it comes to Japanese, like all of a sudden I'm like super introverted, shy, and scared. So I'm like, because I tried to get a partner and I felt like I really wasn't bringing anything to the table. And I was like, so I want to like be able to get a partner. And I don't know why in this particular language, I'm really like shy.
Yeah, I mean, as an extrovert myself, I can totally relate to that, because, I'm definitely confident and outgoing and whatever. But just the other day, a week ago, I had the opportunity there was somebody at a social event that I was passing through, and I had the opportunity to have a conversation in Korean. But like my comfort zone is like online, where I can use Google Translate still, because I'm still a very, very beginner stages. And despite all my confidence, I didn't jump on the situation. And it's mainly just because of lack of experience. So when you've used the language enough, the confidence comes with it. So, you've used those other languages much more. And that's kind of why you would absolutely find conversation partners quickly. You would absolutely jump on situations. And with my Korean, I'm thinking that, you know, I'm not going to lack this confidence. I'm not going to be shy in Korean forever. I just need to keep working on it until I reach that certain stage where I know I'm making my own sentences very comfortably. And then if I bump into somebody in a few weeks' time, I'll just blurt out my Korean at them, and I won't feel embarrassed or anything like that. So it's more a matter of time, and as you progress, as you get better in the language, your natural personality, your natural confidence, and your natural extroversion is going to come out. It's just that you're kind of blocked from doing that right now due to your lack of experience in the language.
Okay, yeah. I know, because usually I would be excited. Oh, somebody speaks that language. I want to practice. But the other day, my son's like, oh, my mom's learning Japanese. And I could feel myself freezing. I'm like, oh my God. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what happened to me at this social event. I mentioned, oh, I've just started learning Korean, and somebody said, there's a Korean guy here. You should speak to him. And I was like, no, I can't. And, you know, it's part of my personality. I'm the outgoing guy. I'm the guy who, like, with any other language, I would go across town if I found out there was a speaker of the language and I would want to talk to them. But as an absolute beginner, I don't have that confidence. I need to work on the language and practice it enough, and the confidence will come. And soon enough, I will be fighting my way through the crowds if I see there's someone who speaks Korean that I can practice with them. But for now, if it happens in the next week or two, I'm still going to be like, and run away, you know?
Okay, thanks.
The only thing I have to add to this, because I'm always shy, regardless of the language or what level I am at, I find that those kind of random situations are almost like setting myself up for failure, because unless I'm prepared for them, like I go in thinking I'm going to use this language in this situation, those sorts of people that you just kind of run into, they're not there to be your practice partners or language exchange partners. They're there for whatever they're there for. And, you know, if they're staff at a restaurant, they're there to work. They don't have the patience to sit and, like, while you fumble through a language because you're either nervous or you're not at the level, you know, where you can confidently communicate yet. Or, you know, someone who is at a social gathering, again, they're there to be at the social gathering. They're not there to be your practice partner. And out of respect for them, like, I feel like I have to be a certain level in order to have the conversation go smoothly enough that I'm not being a burden to this person by surprising them with the fact that I speak their language. And I'm not outgoing, so I'm not really going to want to initiate those sorts of conversations anyways. I have to be for example, if I went to the Chinese market, I would have to go in knowing when I'm here, I am going to use this language, and not go to the Chinese market and be like, oh, well, I'm here. Hey, look, that guy's speaking Chinese. Let me say something to them. Like, that just doesn't work for me. So I have to not only prepare in the sense that I want to go in and have things that I'm going to talk about or things that I'm going to ask, but I also want to be prepared in the sense that I'm going into that situation knowing I'm going to use that language. And it's not because I don't have the ability that I need to have in the language a lot of the time. It's just my personality and not being outgoing and not being comfortable talking to people, especially people that I don't know. And then also being aware that those people aren't necessarily there to practice a language with me. That's, like, not why they're there. So you very easily can become inconvenient to them, and the situation is just not going to work out in your favor, and you're going to walk away from it going, oh, that was terrible. I never want to do that again. So one, preparing; two, having like a certain level so that I'm not a burden. And then three, also, if I really do want to have an exchange partner, I'll find someone who is a language exchange partner and not just like a random person on the street, because depending on how things go randomly on the street, it can be really discouraging, and you don't necessarily need or want that. So finding someone who is prepared for practicing a language with you and knows that you know you're at whatever level that you're at, and that has some compassion for what you're doing, because you know they're there to do an exchange rather than be surprised with Japanese at like a Japanese restaurant or something. So that's just also kind of my take on it. Yeah.
Well, thank you both of you guys. I feel better because I my mindset is, well, just go for it, throw in the deep end, just kind of go for it. And that isn't, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want anybody to know, because then they're going to say, oh, you're learning Japanese, you can't say anything. Oh. So yeah, so I see where you're coming from too. If it's a random person, they won't have that patience.
All right. Any other questions that either of you would like to ask? All right. In that case, Benny, do you have any final words of encouragement for our finalists?
Yeah, I mean, from seeing the videos you guys posted, you've done an amazing job. You should be very proud of that progress. We're always going to feel like it's not good enough and we haven't made enough progress. We wished we were further along, no matter how well you do. And even if this project I'm currently working on goes perfectly, I'm still going to be at the end thinking, oh man, I should have done better. So remember, it happens to all of us, because we live in an imperfect world and life gets in the way and we have days that we're tired. So just always remember you're human and that's okay. And you should be very proud of the progress that you did make, because it's amazing. So very impressive job to everybody.
Thank you very much.
All right, so our winner of the regular challenge is going to get $250 in italki credits, as well as admission to their first boot camp. And our winner of the advanced challenge is going to get 6 months of Link, as well as admission to their next boot camp. So, Benny, could I have a drum roll, please? Our winner for the regular challenge is Elizabeth, who wasn't able to join us. So we will be letting Elizabeth know via message. And our winner for advanced, Benny, is Leah. Congratulations, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And if you're watching this and you too would like to have a 15-minute conversation in your new language, you can learn more at fluentin3months.com/bootcamp. And until the next time.
I have one quick thing. So now I hear about this boot camp. What is the difference between boot camp and the Fluent in 3 months? Can you just give like a really quick, like, what's the difference? Or is it like is it more intense, or what is it?
Benny?
So we asked a lot of people what they liked and what they didn't like about the challenge. And like, as an example, one thing is that we try to give people as much information as possible so that we would give them all the tools they needed to go further in the language. And we actually discovered that this was not the most ideal way to do it, because people were overwhelmed. In the challenge, we say, here's so many things you could do. And people are like, I don't know where to start. So we took feedback like that and any other feedback we could get for things that were not as ideal as they could have been. And we completely revamped the whole system. We've moved away from Slack. We're on a different system now that is a little bit easier, because Slack kind of is not as intuitive for some people. So on a new system called Circle, which is a beautiful interface for a community. And there's a bunch of other things that we've changed about it. That there's how the coaching works. So I actually pop in more now than I did in the challenge. So I do a few more live streams, live Q&As, and there's loads of other things that I don't know if you want to add to that, Shannon. But those are kind of the core things that we wanted to know. Like, obviously we were very proud of the challenge, but nothing's perfect. So we decided to ask people, what would you change? And that's why we relaunched the whole thing and just said, okay, it's boot camp now. And we changed the name because it is very different to the challenge. But the core parts, the important parts are the same, that it's about the community. It's about reaching that 15-minute conversation at the end. You have the support from coaches. So all of those things that are the best parts of the challenge, obviously those continue on, but we improved on everything else that we could.
One other big change that I just want to point out is the course itself. So we totally tore apart the course and rebuilt it from the ground up. And a lot of what made the challenge great is still there. But we've reformatted it, we've rewritten everything, and we've restructured everything so that it's easier to follow, it's throwing less information at you, and you have a lot you have a much clearer sense of direction of where to go over the 90 days and what to do to work towards that 15-minute goal. So that's the only thing that I would add.
Wow, that's an undertaking, but that's fabulous that you did that with all the experience and everybody's feedback. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. And that was a great question and an excellent final question for the final finale of the challenge.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you all for being here today. And until the next time, happy language learning.
Happy language learning.